Hi, how you doing? Today you're joined with myself, James Archery. I'm an IBM Cloud Advisor, and we're joined with
Tanmay bakshi. Hello there. I'm 13 years old.
Exactly. Tanmay, what are we going to be doing today?
All right, let's begin. So now, essentially today on one of IBM's Facebook Live events, we're going to be talking about how you can co-pilot a Parrot AR.Drone 2.0 with Watson Conversation. Let's begin, shall we? So essentially, the entire idea behind this project is that you'll be able to talk to Watson Conversation as essentially it's a kind of chatbot, and you'll be able to essentially co-pilot it, and co-pilot the drone using Watson Conversation. So let's begin, shall we?
All right.
So, before I explain how it works, I'd like to show everyone a really quick demo of how it works. So let's take a quick look at the drone. Can we get the drone into a flight position? So as you can see, this is our drone over here, Parrot AR.Drone 2.0.
Okay.
And on the screen behind me, you should be able to see that I have a Node.js application which is able to communicate with Watson Conversation and is able to ask me for input. So as you can see, this Node.js application has started a new conversation with IBM Watson, and Watson says, "Hello there, my name is Watson, your conversational drone pilot. What would you like to do?" Alright, so now that Watson's asked me what I'd like to do, I can really ask for anything. Now, essentially, with this project, you can currently ask for battery information, altitude information, you can tell it to take off, you can tell it to land, you can tell it to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise, and you can even tell it to go up or down. Alright, so now let's start with asking it about battery information. So, if I begin here, as you can see, I'm going to ask it for battery. And it says, "I'm sorry, your drone didn't provide me with this information yet." So sometimes when it's not able to connect to the special device that I have here, it just says, "Sorry, I wasn't able to get this information yet." So now let me actually just connect it to that device really quickly, and then we will begin.
So while Tanmay works on the technical difficulties, as we know, software always likes to be shy when we're demoing. One of the cool things about Watson technology and that we're using with IoT devices like drones is we have a huge, large partner actually based out of Germany that is using Watson visual recognition software with their drones to identify rust and the steel, and if it's decomposing, if they need to send people actually out to the sites. Therefore, they're going to save time and money and energy and potential safety from the people having to climb the towers on cells that might not be worth needing to be searched for. So other examples are people are using these drones, again with visual recognition software, they're training it into oil pipelines so they can see what are the insides of the pipelines like, and you can't have people go in there, so it's nice to have that aspect to check it out and get a better, closer inside view on those types of capabilities. Another example of where we're using this capability, again with visual recognition and controlling the drone in the conversational aspect, is out in California. They're using the Watson capabilities to identify drought areas with the drones flying over and identifying which people are actually violating, for lack of a better word, the regulations around whether or not they can be using their sprinkler systems all day, every day, right? So you can see there's a lot of applications for using even just for the drones, Watson's capabilities, on top of maybe leveraging it for, as you've seen or heard, with how Amazon is going to be using them potentially to deliver packages, how Uber is possibly thinking about using them for delivering food, right? Even maybe now medical supplies if need be, or in emergency situations where people are distraught, and if you want to do for emergency rescue services, right, you can use those drones to identify issues. So what do you think? Are we good?
Yes, definitely. Essentially,
I can keep going all day, every day on this, and that's how awesome IBM is and how awesome we are able to work with you. So one of the cool things that Tanmay is going to show is this is publicly available on the internet. So you go to bluemix.net, you type in Watson, these capabilities are available to you.
Exactly. So now, continuing though, let's actually take a look at how Watson's able to control our drone. So now, let's begin. So as you can see, if I ask it for battery information, it says that the battery percentage in your drone is currently 100%. The Raspberry Pi had shut off by mistake, so now it's back on, and our server is back up again. So now, let's continue. I can of course also ask it for altitude information. So now, as you can see, I asked it for altitude information, and since the drone is lying flat on the ground, it says your drone's current altitude is 0. If you'd like, you can tell me to increase or decrease the altitude of the drone along with a rate of descent or ascent from 1 to 10. Alright, so now let's say we wanted to send commands to the drone. Now, these commands could be for taking off, landing, rotating, going up or down, all these sorts of commands. So let's try it out. Now, one more thing I'd just like to say is that this drone is quite loud when it is mid-flight. So I won't be able to talk to you while the drone is flying, so unfortunately I'm going to have to tell you what I'm going to do with Watson Conversation right now. Do it on the drone, and then once the drone is done and it's landed, then we'll be able to talk together again, and I'm going to be able to show you what Watson replied to my phrases. So let's begin. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the drone, make it move up. I'm going to check the altitude, make it go down, check the altitude once more, and then land. Let's try that out. So I'm going to begin with a takeoff command.
Alright. I guess you just made it go up.
Yeah.
And now you made it land, is that correct?
Exactly.
Alright, sweet.
So now, that actually went pretty smoothly, and if you can see back here on the TV, as I said take off, Watson understood my intent to take off and said, alright, taking off. It was then able to send the command to take off to the Raspberry Pi, which would then send it to the drone. I can also tell it up 3, and what this means is that Watson will move the drone up at a pace of 3, okay? Then I said stop. Okay. Now, you might be getting confused. When it stopped moving up, it didn't land. It just went back into its own hover state. How did that happen? Well, essentially, the stop and land commands are not the same. What stop actually means is it'll actually stop, quite literally, up, down, and rotational movement. And rotational, by the way, can either be clockwise or counterclockwise. Alright, so essentially land would actually land the drone, whereas stop puts it into a new hover state instead of allowing it to move more. Alright, so that's essentially the difference. So now it stopped moving up, it's just going to hover at that new altitude that it has reached. And next, down 4. I did down 4, that means, of course, a human would be able to say that I want to move the drone down at a pace of 4. Watson understands this as well, and so it says, alright, going down at a rate of 4. Alright, then I say stop once it reaches a sufficient low height, and then I ask it for altitude information. And in this case, it actually got quite low, so it said 0.235 centimeters, which was correct. Alright, 0.235 meters.
Yeah.
Got confused between there. Okay, so 0.235
And for everyone,
meters.
that's because we're actually in Canada right now. In the US, it obviously would be going by the different system of metrics.
Yeah. Alright, so, continuing though. So that was pretty interesting. This time, let's try taking off, rotating clockwise, and then rotating counterclockwise. Then land. Let's try it out, shall we? Let's take off.
Okay, so you made it rotate. Oh! It's getting shy. There you go.
So now the reason you saw that stop in between and go down is sometimes when the propellers don't want to work, it just kind of lands and stalls. But it was able to recover and get back in the air. So essentially, let's take a look at Watson's responses to.
And that landing and stalling though has nothing to do with the code, correct?
Nothing at all.
Okay.
It's the drone's own sort of problem, I guess. But again, it's able to recover because it does fall out. So let's take a look at Watson's responses now, shall we? So, essentially, again, I said take off, and it said, all right, taking off. Now, when I said rotate clockwise 4, it said, all right, rotating the drone clockwise at a pace of 4. So now, one more thing I'd like to say is that the speed, in this case, is 4. However, it can be from 1 to 10, really, any number between 1 and 10. All right, so essentially, one more thing I'd like to say is this is where Watson's powers come in. So essentially, instead of me having to manually program in every single sentence, all right, rotating the drone clockwise at a pace of 1. All right, rotating the drone clockwise at a pace of like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Instead of me having to create all of those sentences one by one, Watson Conversation will understand the entities inside of that phrase along with your intent. And after doing some analyzation, with like pattern recognition, machine learning, all that sort of stuff, it will be able to eventually tell me and actually generate a sentence. All right, rotating the drone clockwise at a pace of 4.
And it would be able to keep repeating that like for 5, 6, 7, 8 without you having to enter in verbatim each time.
Perfectly, yes.
And that's where the machine learning element comes into that, correct?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And of course, the machine learning element also comes into play when it's deciding what you said. So like rotate clockwise 4, that's been sent to a machine learning algorithm in Watson Conversation, which I will get into in just a little bit. And that's able to say that, hey, the user actually wants to rotate right now. All right? So continuing though, all right? Now, after that, I stopped rotational movement, and then I told it to rotate counterclockwise at a speed of 4. All right. So now, essentially, as I said, it's able to understand the entities counterclockwise and 4, and the intent as rotate. So it says, all right, rotating the drone counterclockwise at a pace of 4. Okay. So again, it's able to extract the intent and entities and generate the sentence. Then I tell it to stop once more, and then I land the drone. And that is essentially a quick demo of how the drone's capabilities work. But now, let's get into how the drone actually works.
Yeah, do you have like logic or so we can see how that would look?
Let's take a look at that. So now if I open this up, now what you were seeing on my Mac, where you can see like Watson and your input, that was essentially the main Node.js application that I have running on my Mac. All right. Now, there's one more critical aspect to this application: the internet. Now, you must be wondering, why is it so important for Node.js to be able to communicate with the internet? Well, it's because Watson is on the internet as a REST API, which is, again, one of Watson's greatest advantages. You don't need a device that has a ton of computing power to be able to use it. You can use it from any computer, any device in the world.
As long as it has the internet. Exactly.
As long as it has internet and programming capabilities that allow you to connect to the internet. Okay? So now the drone, the main Node.js application is able to communicate with Watson Conversation via the internet. Okay? But then we have a problem. And the problem is that we're using a Parrot AR.Drone 2.0. Why is this a problem, you may ask? Well, Parrot decided that they did not want to use Bluetooth with this drone, but instead they wanted to use Wi-Fi. So now the reason that this is a problem, the reason that this is a problem for us is because, first of all, when you have a Wi-Fi sort of interface, it can only connect to one connection at a time. However, with Bluetooth, as you probably know, you can connect to multiple connections at a time. Your keyboard, mouse, webcam, microphone, even the drone at the same time. And so, now we have to somehow find a way to bridge the drone's Wi-Fi hotspot with the Node.js main application's internet connection. And so in order to do this, there's some sort of secret sauce that I use, which in this case is a Raspberry Pi. Now,
awesome.
Yeah. So, if you didn't already know, the Raspberry Pi 3 has network interface a Wi-Fi network interface built in. Now, using this built-in Wi-Fi interface, I can connect to one Wi-Fi connection, and then I just install a new USB sort of Wi-Fi dongle onto the Pi as well, and so now we have 2 internet connections. Okay, one is going to the drone, and one to the main internet connection. And so now, essentially, I'm able to use the Node.js main application to send commands to the internet, which goes to the Raspberry Pi, which is then sent to the drone's Wi-Fi hotspot, and in turn to the drone, And I am, of course, also able to bring information from the drone to the internet, to the main application, where it then goes into Watson Conversations context variable, which I will talk about in just a moment. Now, just in case you were wondering, the way this actually works is by using an HTTP, or technically 3 HTTP servers on the Raspberry Pi. One listening on port 4000, one on 5000, and one on 5500. Now, if you're wondering what these ports are, well, the 4000 port essentially allows me to have a live PNG stream of the drone. So essentially, the HD front-facing camera of the drone is being live streamed to that port. On the 5000 port, I have a JSON, lots of JSON navigation data, which is being pulled from the drone every 1 second. Essentially, this data contains like a lot of stuff. It contains like movement data, rotational data, battery, temperature, pressure, literally everything you could imagine about the drone. Okay, and so that's essentially, and of course that actually goes into the context variable of Watson as well, and once it goes to the context variable of Watson, Watson is quite literally, as I said, aware of what the drone's current battery level is, and the altitude, all this sort of stuff. Of course, and of course, port 5500 is sort of the main port, I guess. It's essentially the port that keeps listening on the Pi for commands from the Node.js main application, which comes in turn from Watson. And so essentially this port will listen for those commands, and right as it gets them, it'll do a little bit of analysis on them and push those to the drone. And then the drone will be able to execute that command. All right. So now, as I said, before I get into that, I'd like to say that if you'd like to see the source code of this application to actually, try it out for yourself and include this sort of logic in your own applications, please do, because right after this event, this code will be open source. Or,
awesome.
You know what, actually? Let's just do that right now, why don't we? So if I go to my GitHub page here, I can just go to settings and make this public right now. Alright, so this is one of the code repositories.
And your GitHub name is tanmay B123?
Yes, yes.
Nice.
Thanks. So now if I go to the desktop end as well, and I go to settings, and I make this a
So while he does that, he has a whole bunch of other applications that he's created, and he's open sourced that code on there, right?
Yes. For example, like Ask Tanmay.
Ask Tanmay you built on there.
System, yes.
And also, I think you've also got some really good demos on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Tanmay Bakshi. So it's a really cool place too, where you can check out how to leverage his code to work and build out your own drone, or build out your own. I think you did like a mousetrap IoT device at one point.
Marcus Van Kempen, who is one of my mentors from IBM.
Nice. So is it now published?
Yes, that's not on GitHub just yet. That's going to be on GitHub soon, though. And then, once it's on GitHub, though, I will tweet about it. So whoever's watching right now, if you want that code, it will be up soon.
So what's this? So what are we going to do now?
Yeah, so now, essentially, I'd like to get into how Watson Conversation actually works. So now, to begin, as I said, Watson Conversation does a majority, or pretty much all of the processing in this application. Okay, so now let's just say that your phrase is go up at a speed of 2. Now, a human, literally within like a millisecond, will be able to tell you that this sentence means you want the drone to go upwards, and the pace at which it should do that is 2. Okay, so now a computer can't do that. First of all, right? A computer does not understand natural language at all, okay? However, again, we're talking about Watson, which is able to introduce artificial cognition into this and able to understand this natural language by extracting the signal from the noise, essentially. So now, again, this is natural language. It has a lot of noise that the computer just doesn't need. And so it has 2, though, pieces of key information. And these pieces of key information are up and 2. Okay? And these pieces of key information are called entities in Watson Conversations case. Alright, so now, for example, up, alright, when I was training Watson Conversation, I defined an entity type, and I called that entity type up-down direction. Now, up-down direction, the entity type, has 2 values, up and down, alright? And in this case, it chose the value up, because, of course, I want the drone to move up. All right. Next, we have a speed entity type. When I was training Watson Conversation, I gave it the speed entity type, and it has 10 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are its values. And in this case, since I chose to go up at a speed of 2, it'll say 2, all right, which is correct. Now, we have the key pieces of information extracted. All right, and that's pretty good, all right, but we need more information to be able to actually determine what the user means by this phrase. So, in this case, that key piece of information is called an intent, all right. So now, what is an intent? Well, technically, we could just determine what the user means by looking at the entities of their phrase, right? We could say, okay, up to probably means go up at a speed of 2. But let's just say that you happen to say take off, and you by mistake mention up, and you by mistake mention 2. If it were just determining off of entities, it would go up at a speed of 2, even though it hasn't even taken off yet. And so in order to solve this problem, we use intents. Now, just a little bit of history about Watson, if you'd like to hear this. Essentially, before Watson Conversation was released, just a few weeks ago, in fact, there used to be a service called Watson Dialogue. Okay, so Watson Dialogue was essentially the old times Watson Conversation. All right, it helped you to create chatbots, but they didn't have the intent ability. There was just the dialogue flow and entities. All right. However, that was powerful, but a lot of people started to combine the natural language classifier with dialogue in order to create very powerful chatbots. And so essentially what the guys over at Watson decided to do, and just before I continue, I'm sure you all have heard of this, one of the most famous examples of this was the movie selection example, right? Where you could give it, in a chatbot information about the type of movie you'd like to watch, and then it would be able to suggest lots of movies for you to watch.
Okay.
That was a pretty nice application. It was able to combine the natural language classifier with Watson Conversation to create one of those really powerful chatbots, all right? But now there was one more problem, okay? So, or not problem necessarily, but the guys at Watson decided, why not merge NLC, natural language classifier, and dialogue to create conversation, then retire dialogue. All right, so that was a great idea. So now essentially we have one service called Conversation that combines the natural language classifier along with dialogue so that you have intents, entities, and the dialogue flow. And of course, if you just like to use conversation like dialogue, go ahead and do it. There's no one stopping you. I mean, the intents and entities features are completely optional. Right? You don't need to use them, so you can make a conversation act like dialogue. Though,
like if they respond with this, just respond with that type of thing.
Exactly. You can make it.
But it's
exactly
very manual, and it takes a lot of
extremely
input.
manual,
Whereas
exactly.
with intent, like you said, you didn't have to write out the whole sentence all the time.
Exactly.
Like if I wanted to change my flight, if I didn't say JFK, if I just said JFK and not airport,
Exactly.
it still knows with that acronym because I'm in this type of an app.
Exactly.
I'm looking to go to JFK.
Completely correct.
Right.
And that's how the intent really does help out. So now, let's say we have this phrase, all right. Now, even though we are technically sending this phrase to Watson Conversation to understand the intent, the algorithm behind how Watson Conversation will classify it is the same as the natural language classifiers. So it's safe to assume that we are actually sending this request to the natural language classifier just with a different API, instead the conversation service.
Oh, so these are also APIs, right?
Yeah, these are all APIs. The natural language classifier, conversation, dialogue used to be one, many more powerful services that you can combine into your applications to create one very powerful application. In fact, one more thing, just a little bit off topic, but one more thing I would recommend is sort of combining services like Retrieve and Rank with conversation to create extremely powerful chatbots that can provide useful information to your users. But continuing though, so again, as I said, it's safe to assume that this phrase is going to the natural language classifier, except with a slightly different API, the conversation, API. So once conversation or natural language classifier is done classifying your phrase, you get the intent, up, down. So now Watson knows that your intent is to go either up or down, Then from the entities, it was able to extract a deeper meaning. And this deeper meaning was, instead of just wanting to go up or down at a specific speed, it knows that speed and it knows the direction. You want to go up and you want to go at a speed of 2. And that is essentially how the entirety of this application works. So James, do we have any questions today?
Oh yeah, let me check the Facebook Live. While you do that though, when you show us what
Sure,
you've done
why
recently,
not?
I think you wrote a book, right?
Yes, actually. In fact, I have actually written a book. It's called Hello Swift, iOS App Programming for Kids and Other Beginners. And it's essentially, as the title suggests, a book for kids and beginners to learn iOS app development through Swift from scratch. So essentially, if you'd like to check it out, please do. If you think it could help somebody, I'd be glad for it to help somebody. Again, I love to share my knowledge, so a book is just another one of those media through which to do that. Of course, I do also have a YouTube channel where you can sort of see how I like to share my knowledge and stuff like that. But also, just in case you were wondering more about Watson, of course you can actually contact me and see my tutorials on my YouTube channel, but I'd also highly recommend actually, attending World of Watson this year, which is another one of those conferences hosted by IBM officially that is about Watson and how you can use its cognitive capabilities. It's actually this month in October. It's going to be in Las Vegas. That's going to be very interesting. In fact, a few of my mentors will be presenting there as well, namely Marcus Van Kempen. But continuing though, one more thing, I'd also really highly recommend attending Watson Developer Conference. Again, a great conference, pretty much a gold mine for developers about Watson. And this time, it's going to be in San Francisco.
So a couple questions that we have, actually it's kind of funny. I think we've already answered it, but again, if you wanted to use these Watson API services, how would you go do that?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, these Watson APIs, and that's actually one of their high advantages, is that they're available online. You really don't need any specific amount of computing power in order to be able to use Watson services, because they're actually hosted on Bluemix for you as Bluemix services. So if you wanted to use any of the services that I've used in my application, please feel free to. You can just go to Bluemix, sign up for an account if you don't already have one, and if you do, just search up Watson in the Bluemix catalog, and you can create all these different types of services, mix them together, create really powerful cognitive applications.
Someone actually asked this, and I don't know if we're going to solve that problem right here on the page, but they said, I wish Watson could help the IBM storage team quickly provision storage.
That depends on what the more specific problem is. But
Yeah.
Technically it could if you had a very specific problem that required cognitive ability. Yes, that's completely possible.
Yeah, I think what you could possibly do, right, is if you're trying to identify, let's say you're looking at types of workloads and you know it's going to be, you're getting a lot of influx on your application, you could potentially do predictive capabilities and say, hey, I'd recommend we maybe auto-scale the storage to be provisioned for this.
Exactly.
So, or you could even empower Watson, right, to make the decision for you if you wanted connecting to whatever source you're using to provision storage. Is that fair enough to say? Can you do that?
Yeah, definitely. As long as it requires that type of cognitive ability, yes, for sure.
Okay. Another person asked how old you are. I know we talked about it earlier, but you did, I think you just turned 13?
Yeah, just October 16th.
So I would like to wish him a happy birthday. He turned 13 yesterday, right?
Yes. No, actually, October 16th, like 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah.
I was late to the birthday. That was my fault. Let's see what else we got over here. Tanmay, which one of the Watson APIs is your favorite?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily have a favorite because they're all very useful in what they do. They do very different things. There's a huge diverse amount of APIs, and that's why I don't necessarily have a favorite. But if I had to mention something, in terms of easiest to use, it would have to be sort of the natural language classifier, and in sort of the most sort of thing that I could think of use cases for, it would have to be conversation. But things that I like to mash up type of thing would be the natural language classifier and retrieve and rank, for example. Conversation and retrieve and rank are a very good couple as well. And of course, Concept Insights is another very powerful service that I'm actually currently creating apps for, which you will find out about soon on my GitHub page.
So we have one more question about actually the conversation API. And the gentleman asked, does it allow for customization? And what we mean by that, like initiating a conversation at a particular time or even setting a context to the conversation.
Definitely. In fact, about your context question actually first, this project uses the context variable of Watson heavily. Essentially, every 1 second, I grab new data from the drone, such as battery and altitude data, and I put that into the Watson conversation variable. And so, essentially, throughout the dialogue flow, I'm able to use those those context variables in order to tell me what to say next, or to sort of change how Watson speaks. Like, for example, let's say you're mid-flight and Watson knows that via the context variable. It could also know the amount of battery left. And let's say, okay, so the battery is getting less than 20% and you're mid-flight, right? In that case, you could say, okay, Watson, tell the user that the battery's getting low, you might want to land now. And when it gets to 10%, just land it without asking the user. That type of thing can be done with the Watson conversation context variable.
So I know your personal story about how you started and you got into programming and what inspired you and where you're hoping to go.
Yes.
Do you mind sharing that? Because I know some other people are wondering, what got you into programming, and now where are you hoping to go?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Well, to be completely honest, actually, what got me into programming was actually when I was 5 years old. Of course, I didn't really have that much to do all day, so I would watch my dad programming almost all day, and so it really intrigued me as to how like a computer could add two numbers or display my name on the screen. And so essentially I wanted to find out more about how it was able to do this and how you can get a computer to do this. And so of course after asking my dad to teach me a bit of programming, he introduced me to the concept, batch programming.
You started in Batch Pro?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Well, I had actually a little bit of Fox Pro as well, and a little bit of C. And after I, got fluent with the programming fundamentals and basics, I started to use...
The ABCs.
Yeah, sort of the ABCs of programming. I started to use the internet as a learning resource, and then I also learned how to do iOS app development. And then at the age of 9 years old, my first iOS app, T-Tables, was accepted into the iOS App Store.
And T-Tables did your math homework, correct?
Yes. Kinda. No, it actually taught you how to do your math homework.
Ah, okay.
It could teach you your times tables.
I feel like the teachers in your school would probably be like, can we actually use your app to do this for us?
Kind of, yes.
Someone actually asked this, which is another interesting question. Can we integrate Watson in JavaScript-based framework?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I'm actually using JavaScript right now in order to control this drone. I'm using Node.js specifically, and so I'm using the Watson Developer Cloud Node.js SDK, which you can find on GitHub, on the Watson Developer Cloud GitHub. And so they essentially have this really powerful framework to use almost every single Watson service there is, and it becomes really easy. Instead of having to send REST requests all the time, you can just use their API, and it makes it a lot simpler. Although I must say, the way that IBM Watson works with its REST APIs is much simpler than most other companies can provide. It's even more fun to program when you have a framework instead of having to call REST APIs over and over again. So, of course, the Node.js SDK will really help you out with that.
Now, I can speak to this, but I want to see what your thoughts are on this first.
Okay.
Gentleman's asking, can I know how Watson will be used to detect advanced persistent threats? So this is about security, right? Can we expect it to have more human-like approach if we can detect new threats?
Yes.
Or do we still need to depend on humans to research and write direction signatures? So how does Watson fall into play around security, logs and potential attacks and threats?
Well, depends. You're thinking about sort of technical security, like software security?
Yes.
Okay. It's not like physical security. So, well, as far as I know, I don't think, the natural language classifier might be good here. Not sure if it would be powerful enough for this type of a use case because, as you can see, this type of use case would be very diverse. There would be lots of different issues caused by lots of different problems, and the relationships between them would be very hard to determine unless you had an absolutely ginormous training training set which Watson could find patterns from. So I'm not exactly sure how you would go about doing this with Watson at least, but if you could implement something like a custom, I mean, with such advanced problems, you'd either need a special Watson service. I mean, there are other Watson services that aren't available on the public Bluemix page, but you can pay per month to use, and so those more powerful Watson services may be of more use for this type of scenario, or maybe even a custom neural network might work.
Yeah, and and what I can say is actually that IBM Security is actually working with Watson capabilities and coming out with a potential offering, if not already, on identifying the patterns and trends and intents, right? Because that's one of the most powerful things about Watson, right? Is it identifies patterns and trends and the context that you're relating to that, right? And if you start training this type of or influx in your network, it's probably coming from this type of situation, and therefore we should protect ourselves in that, or that's how we respond.
Exactly.
Right.
That's great.
Someone also asked, how accessible is Watson for someone who does not have a technical or programming background?
In fact, actually, just before I continue, that is again one of the huge advantages of IBM Watson. You don't need like a PhD in machine learning to be able to implement this sort of stuff. That's the best part. All you need to do is have some sort of small programming experience. Like, I mean, I mean, I heard your question. You don't really have that much programming experience, but if you can get started, learn a programming language, which, in case you wanted to, I mean, do sort of iOS development. As I said, my book Hello Swift could help you out with that. And so essentially you just need to learn that sort of basic programming fundamentals, and once you are able to get to that sort of point where you can create applications, then after that it's literally just a few REST API calls to call Watson and to be able to create your own cognitive based applications.
So I got another one over here that I think is interesting, and that was a great explanation on how we can use it. And actually, again, I'd recommend going to IBM Watson or Bluemix.net and looking at which of the services interest you, because we actually have very nice user interface examples of first understanding how they would work, and you could potentially leverage those in your day-to-day or your environment. And then once you want to get more into the programming aspect, we even have the SDK kits for each of these services available to you on GitHub. You can pull that. Another one person said, will Watson be cost effective to reach low budget clients? So, people like Walmart could probably afford it, but what about these APIs? Is it going to be, you think that, like, if I want to start my own company, could I leverage it? Or
I really do think so. In fact, again, that's one of the advantages about Watson. It's not overpriced. Watson is relatively affordable for small businesses.
Yeah, and so I'm going to tag on to that one too. I've actually worked with a couple startups in New York City. Actually, one of them was Boom Fantasy, and they are using Watson trade-off analytics to identify with their market budget every month whether or not they're receiving, which of the customers or consumers are the ones that they should be marketing to. Because as a startup, your budget is limited, right? And you have that burn rate that you have to deal with. So if you can validate every month or even sooner how efficient your money is being spent on the marketing, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through meetups or any other types of campaigns that you'd run, that'll help you out. So it's definitely used in the startups environment, all the way on to the large corporate companies that are using it today. And again, one of the things that we work with too, especially if you're a small startup looking for that, we've got IBM Global Entrepreneur Program. We'll be able to provide you credits if you validate for that, so you'll be able to leverage our services on Bluemix and Watson. Another thing that I guess I was going to go at here is someone actually said, can Watson speak CAPTCHA image? So you know how the CAPTCHAs on that security thing, would it be able to know to go into it and say, right?
No, I mean, in theory, yes, but then again, since some CAPTCHAs are extremely random, it may take a lot of training. But then again, it's completely possible using visual recognition and, of course, text-to-speech. Then again, a lot of training would be required.
And I know a lot of folks are actually continuing to keep asking about the price and how much it's going to cost. Again, the way we built these initial APIs out for the public to test with, you can sign up for your Bluemix. It's a free trial. Then from there, what you can do is you'll see the API calls, capabilities, and actually after you've hit the freemium model, if you actually want to start going past that again, there's always multiple ways to potentially increase your credits if you validate for that through IBM Global Entrepreneur Program. If you're one of our business partners, we can work with you on that as well. another thing that we do is you use your regular credit card and you pay per API call. So that's actually, again, how it's working. That's where we see actually cloud going. You pay for what you use.
Exactly.
Right.
You don't just
and we're going to provide a link to Tanmay's GitHub.
yes.
Again,
Just in
I know.
case you were wondering though, it's tanmay123. I can pull that up right now. So this is my GitHub page, and you can see all my open source projects here.
Yeah. I want one more. But Tanmay, where do you see yourself going next after this?
Well, to be completely honest, I think it would be, well, mainly, I want to continue to do what I'm currently doing, all right? So I want to continue, you know, all my software development, keynote speaking, iOS app development, of course, continuing to share my knowledge, and of course, build with cognitive like Watson, and creating custom machine learning solutions as well. I want to continue using things like AI, for example, and so, you know, I want to continue to gain more experience at this, and as I gain more experience, of course, share my knowledge about it, and, you know, just keep getting better, reaching out to more people. And in fact, actually, one of my goals is to reach out to and help at least 100,000 aspiring kid coders and beginners.
So you speak at STEM events, right, as well?
Yes,
You've
yes,
done that
exactly.
before, and I think you're going to be in Northwest Bentonville, Arkansas,
Yes,
to
exactly.
speak to a couple of those students here.
Yes, that's going to be coming
You've
up
spoken
soon.
to schools in Toronto as well?
Yes, exactly. Toronto, around Toronto as well.
So I know the answer to this because I'm forced to be, this is the part of the marketing, you know, pre-sales aspect, but people are wondering, you know, how can IBM assist self-driving cars, automobiles, autopilot, self-flying vehicles, boats, and you name it, anything that has a motor on it, how would they help?
Well, in fact, that's actually what my goal was, to create something like an autonomous drone that uses IBM Watson. And I really think that IBM Watson provides very powerful capabilities for you to be able to do this type of thing. So, for example, actually, visual recognition can really help you out with things like let's say you're building an autonomous RC car, you can use visual recognition to see whether the whether the RC car should start turning slightly right or slightly left. And so that's how visual recognition can be used in things like RC cars. Drones, for example, it can detect faces, all that sort of stuff. It can really be used in autonomous vehicles very nicely.
So an example that we're actually using this today is a thing called Ollie. So Watson Ollie, it'll be at World of Watson, but we're actually implementing it. There's this 3D printing company that they printed out all the parts in the span of, I think it was like 3 months or less. It's massive, it's creative. And they built with Watson as the brain behind it, speech to text, text to speech. So if a person presses the button and says, hello, where should I take you? And you could say, I want to go to the Italian restaurant. Where's good? And it could recommend lists, and then it'll start driving for you along a set path that it has. It's actually in National Harbor in Maryland, near the Washington, D.C. area, and they're using it right there. I know we're actually looking at leveraging it in other implementations as well. So that's actually where and how we've already been using this in self-driving automobile vehicles.
Definitely.
For public transportation.
Very fun.
Let's see what else we got here.
All right.
Let's see. Okay, so great talk. I'm curious, what do you want to do in life? Did you already say that?
Yes.
All right.
If you want, I can repeat that sort of. As I said, my goal is to mainly reach out to and help at least 100,000 aspiring kid coders and beginners. And of course, actually, I'm already around 2,000 people there.
Yeah.
And of course, I just want to continue. And once I reach that goal, set a higher one, and just continue to share my knowledge and help out as many people as I can.
And that's another thing. Please like and follow him on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, if not already. Because he's not stopping here, guys. He's going to keep doing more. He's working with some of IBM's top minds like John Cohn and Marcus around IoT. Another quick question, though, and I get this a lot too, is IBM Watson and these APIs, and now they're RESTful APIs,
Yes.
could I use it with an application that's on another platform that's not Bluemix? So if it's like AWS or Microsoft
as far as I know, Watson does not provide that capability yet, as far as I know yet. But for now, though, you have to host sort of these Watson services on Bluemix as services on Bluemix. But then again, the ease of use of Bluemix really just tells me that there really isn't much need for hosting IBM Watson services on other platforms.
Okay. So, first and foremost, always feel free to go try it out on Bluemix. That's how we were going to host it. It's our platform as a service. And there you can combine it with a lot of other things. If you're an enterprise, you can start combining it with your business process managers. It's your systems of record, because we're going to expose it through API Connect, and these are now going to be RESTful APIs.
Yes.
You can now combine with Watson
Yes.
valuable insights that maybe you're using mainframe on the back end. These apps that you've never been able to touch it, they have new capabilities, right, that you can apply that to, and it's some pretty awesome stuff. Let's see, how would you describe the differences between, someone mentioned, how would you describe the differences between, I guess, Amazon Echo and Watson?
Okay.
Have you played at all with Amazon Echo at all?
No, actually, I haven't played with Amazon Echo yet.
So, this is just my preference and point of view. When it comes to IBM's cognitive capabilities, we've really designed them to be enterprise grade in scale. We've tested them meticulously. We've built these corpuses up at a certain level so that when we give them back to you as the user, they're going to hit a certain quality assurance level, right? Also, one of the things that we don't do versus some of the other, like Google now or Siri, they ask you and for your data to then be shared with others because it's part of their training process. We don't do that because we want your data to always be your data, and so that keeps your competitive advantage, right? If we were to have all the banks give us their data to train and then give it out as a platform, you've lost your competitive advantage. So on that note, Tanmay, is there anything else you'd like to share before we leave? I think that we've already talked about One Watson and Interconnect.
Yeah, I've already talked about that. And I guess that's actually going to be it for this Facebook Live event. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. And yeah, I mean, if you'd like to check out the source code of this project, please do. It's on my GitHub, tanmay123. There will be a link to it after this event. And then, yeah, if you'd like to, I mean, if you have any questions, you can actually email me at my email, tajimani@gmail.com. That'll be in the description of this Facebook Live event as well. And I think that's going to be it for today.
All right, thank you again for tuning in. And again, go to his website, go to his Facebook, go to his GitHub. He's going to be doing a lot more with this on his own, and good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Thanks again, guys.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.